Hi everyone, welcome to Chicory's Travels. This is the second video in our RV show series. So these are presentations that we typically give at RV shows, but because of COVID this year, we're not having the RV shows. So we wanted to share the information. You can go to the playlist in our YouTube channel at any time if you want to see the other videos. This one is specifically going to be about budgeting for RV travel, otherwise known as the costs of RV ownership. And we are going to tell you about many of the costs that are involved in RV ownership, not just the actual cost of the RV. And we're not doing this to scare you away from getting an RV. We have an RV, we love our RV, we love to travel in our RV. But what we want you to do is to buy the RV that you can afford to not only own, but to operate, to take it out and to enjoy your travels. And that's why we're going to share this information for you. And we're going to cover the highlights and the biggest expenses. We do have more information on our website, and we will link to that below.
And just to let you know up front that we're not going to actually share our costs because that would not be fair. We kind of are the average maybe, but we may go a little overboard in some areas that aren't important to you. So we're just really going to talk about the costs associated with it, but not give any hard dollar figures, because if you do any looking or research on any of the social media platforms, everybody's costs are so different. So you have to figure out what's important to you when you're doing this process, and that will help you gauge which costs you're going to want to increase or decrease depending on your style of travel. So if you're new to the channel, a little bit about us. We're Julie and Sean Chicory, and we both spent 20 years in the military, and when we were done, we didn't really have anywhere to settle down. We were empty nesters. Our three boys had all grown up, so we decided to live in an RV and travel around the country, and we did that for 6 years. And this year we finally slowed down a little bit and bought a home base, but we're still going to continue to travel quite a bit and enjoy the RV lifestyle.
So the first thing you have to know when you're establishing an RV budget is you have to think about your RV travel style. And this is kind of what Sean was alluding to a few minutes ago, that the costs are so different for every individual. And the thing that really affects that cost difference is the travel style. So let me just give you a few examples of what I mean by that. First off, how many people are going to be traveling with you? That's going to affect the actual RV that you're going to have, and then your cost of things like food and entertainment and all that. And then, like, how far do you like to travel in a day? So a lot of full-time RVers, which we used to be in that crowd, have this 3-3 rule where each day they like to stop by 3 o'clock and not travel more than 300 miles in a day. But that doesn't necessarily work for people who are more recreational RV travels or weekend warriors, because if you only have like a 2-week vacation and you live in New York and you want to go out to Yellowstone, you might be putting more than 300 miles in a day. And that's also a very long trip in just a 2-week period, which would affect things like fuel. So asking yourself those types of questions are really going to help you understand a little bit better as we go forward through the rest of the slides.
So the first point we want to hit on is RV expenses. And that's not just the cost of the RV, like if you have a monthly payment. That's one of the costs, but you also have, like for us now, we could have storage costs because we're not full-time traveling anymore. And if you live somewhere that has an HOA, they may not let you store your RV at your house. So then you're going to have to find somewhere to store it. And these typically charge by the foot and can vary anywhere from like $50 a month to $150 or more a month. So storage is definitely something you have to think about when you're not using your RV. The second item that we like to highlight is insurance. And you might be lucky and be able to add it to your car or auto policy. and that's typically a little bit cheaper. You may not be able to do that, and you have to get a separate policy. Also, if you plan on doing any sort of extended or full-time travel, you're going to want to get what they call full-timer insurance, which not only covers the vehicle, but also covers the stuff inside, more like a homeowner's policy. And so that's another cost that could add up over time, and something that you definitely want to budget for, because you have to have insurance on these things if you want to, if just in case of an accident or something like that. The other thing is registration. These are vehicles, so they do need to be registered. And some states, like the state we're in now, Virginia, they have a personal property tax. And they assess the value of the vehicle every year and tax you based on what the value of that vehicle is. So this could be quite expensive if you have a brand new RV. I think when we first got ours and we were living in Maryland, it was about $3,000 to register it. So definitely do some investigating in your state, find out what the registration costs are and if there are any taxes associated with it. And then also some states like Virginia, where we are now, they also have an annual inspection that you have to get done. Their rule here is if it has any type of brakes, it has to have a state inspection before you can register it. So that's another cost that you'll have to incur in keeping the RV roadworthy and registered.
And I just want to point out that this can really add up, and that's why it's so important to do the research ahead of time. Because, for example, if you were going to finance a camper and you were going to you had a budget of, say, $300 a month, and you go looking for that camper, and you find one, and you're like, hey, I'm good. It's $300 a month, and that's what I have in my budget. But then you find out, oh, now I have to pay $50 a month to store it. And, the insurance might be another $50 a month. So now you're up to $400 a month. And that's what you did not include in your budget. And that's where it gets a little sticky.
The next thing is maintenance. And this can be one of the most expensive items to keep up with. If you let it go, it can get even more expensive. So it's very important to keep up with the preventive maintenance on your RV, no matter what type it is. The one thing we recommend is you get all these books that come with your RV, because all of the components are made by somebody different. And it's important to go through those books before, right after you get your RV, before you take it out, and see what the preventive maintenance requirements are on all these different pieces of equipment. And then figure out, like we put it on a spreadsheet, or I put it on a Google Calendar, so I know that, at this time, these particular preventive maintenance things are due. And also, kind of ahead of time what tools you're going to need. And most of the time, it's just a simple, basic set of tools. The one exception is most RV screws are Anderson bits. So you want to make sure you have the Anderson bits, plenty of them, because they always seem to get lost. And then keep up with that preventive maintenance. And if you're intimidated or shy, I guess, about doing maintenance, just go on YouTube and find a video and about every preventive maintenance task on an RV has about 20 YouTube videos. It's just finding the person with the right temperament and instruction that you can agree with, and start doing these things yourself. If you're looking for some preventive maintenance tips, later on in this series that we're doing, we have a whole presentation on preventive maintenance, and that will give you a start as to the important things you need to begin with as far as preventive maintenance goes. Another thing is gear and modifications. Now, you may not do something as extensive as a complete electrical upgrade and solar to your RV right away, but you may want to do that eventually. And it's important to start budgeting for that now, because you don't want to see that $7,000 hit to your wallet all at once, and you haven't really prepared for it. But immediately after the purchase, there's things that you want to buy right away, like a sewer hose extension, maybe some outdoor camping chairs. And then you may want to add other modifications as you go along. So it's important to factor that in. Even one big one is if you have a travel trailer, you might want to get a weight distribution hitch, which is quite expensive, and put that on before you even leave the RV dealership.
And there's probably two things that we recommend that everyone get that kind of are a little pricey right out the gate, and that's the tire pressure monitoring system. And this is whether you have a motorhome or a tow behind, and it will monitor not only your tires, but you can also have it monitor the tires of your tow vehicle if you have a camper, or your vehicle that you're towing behind you if you have a motorhome. And the other one is the electrical management system. This goes into the power pedestal at the campground, and then you plug your power into that, or you can get one that you wire inside. But both of these things run around between like $300 and $500, depending on which one you get. And so a lot of people don't think about that right when they buy the RV, and they're like, what? Now I have to spend another $1,000 on all these extra things. So it's just another thing to consider.
And we'll put a link to Techno RV in the show notes or the video description below. And they sell all that stuff. And a great thing about them is they use all that stuff as well. So they have very good tips and very good instructions on how to use those items. So fuel costs can be the second most expensive line in your RV budget, next to campground costs. And there's 3 different types of fuel that you need to budget for. The actual fuel, if you have a drivable, or if you're towing, the fuel that goes in your vehicle. You have generator fuel, if you have a generator and you're going to be doing lots of boondocking. And then you also have propane. Unless you have an all-electric coach, something in there is going to need propane, and it's typically your furnace and your stove and your oven. So these are all costs that you need to factor in. And depending, like Julie said, if you're trying to go from New York to Yellowstone, your fuel costs are going to be very high. And if you're just staying local within 100 to 150 miles of your home, when you're out weekend camping, then your fuel is going to be probably a lot lower. So a couple of just quick tips for you on fuel costs. Just slow down. Your RV's usually not rated to go over 60, 65 miles an hour. And so slow down and enjoy the journey. Don't try to speed to your destination. It could cause more problems than just a more expensive fuel bill. It could cause a lot of issues if you have a blowout or something like that. And then research the fuel prices on the way to your destination, and kind of budget for that in your costs. And it's easy to see through apps like Gas Buddy and stuff on what the fuel costs are in whatever areas you're traveling through.
And that's really important because, like, when we were traveling out west, especially, we got some serious sticker shock at the pump because we didn't look ahead to see how much fuel was actually going to be, and it was substantially higher.
Yeah, California was really expensive.
So the next cost is campgrounds. This could easily be your most significant cost, but it doesn't have to be. So I'll just give you a few different examples to give you an idea of what I mean by that. First, when you're thinking about campgrounds, one of the things that you pay for is the hookups. So the full hookup means water, power, and sewer right at your site. Most of the privately owned campgrounds have the full hookups. The privately owned campgrounds also have the amenities. So things like swimming pools and hot tubs, or like this photo, it's right on the beach, it's the location. They could have activities for the kids to be involved in. And so you pay an extra price for that resort style of accommodation. However, there are privately owned mom and pop campgrounds that have the full hookups but nothing else really, and you're wanting those just because they're near where you want to go. Now, the next one is the public campgrounds. So these are things like national parks and state parks and even their city and county parks. And these, they can be full hookup, but they're often called partial hookup. And usually the first thing to go is sewer, but they will often have dump stations. So you're giving up a little bit of a convenience, but it's a lower price because it's also public, so it's subsidized by the government. They also typically don't have as many amenities, but especially the state and national parks, I mean, it's the location really that you're paying for. And so they can be a very good deal. And then finally, you could actually not pay any money or pay just a nominal fee for a permit to do dry camping or boondocking. So this is where you are just out on public lands. I'm not talking about staying overnight at like Walmart or Cabela's or Cracker Barrel. You can do that too, like on your way to a destination, just stay overnight for free somewhere. But I'm talking about when you actually get to your destination. There are a lot of places, particularly out west, where you can do boondocking, where you're just totally off grid in nature, and then that obviously would be free. So the next one is food expenses. The great thing about an RV, even the smallest little pop-up camper, is that you have a means to bring your own food and to cook your own food. And so this can actually save money, but you do still have to plan ahead. You have to plan ahead because you need to make sure that you can either bring all your groceries with you, or if your trip is longer or your camper smaller and you have just a little small fridge or small pantry and you're planning on going to a grocery store, you have to make sure that that's not going to break the bank. For example, when we were at Big Bend National Park, I had forgotten one item, and actually I hadn't planned on making s'mores because we don't do that all the time, but we knew someone was coming that had kids, and I wanted to be able to make s'mores for them or let them make them. And so I went to the local store. There was only one in like an hour from that location, and the graham crackers were $6 a box. I didn't buy them. I didn't even look at the chocolate after that. So you need to just plan ahead a little bit for that. And the biggest thing is also bringing snacks and then like water bottles. And you can even bring like a kids get tired of water or you get tired of water, you can get the little things that you put in the water to flavor it. But just drinks and snacks alone will save you a huge amount of money when you're traveling. And then if your trip is going to be longer than just a couple of days, you're going to have to plan to do a little bit of laundry. Some of the full service campgrounds will have a laundry room, but they always cost. So you're going to want to make sure that you just budget for that extra cost. And it can range from, I've seen as low as 75 cents for a load of wash, but what I see more commonly is around $2.50, and I've even seen it as high as $5. So you're definitely going to have to plan for that if you're going to be more than just a couple of days on your trip.
Next is electronics. We all can't live without our cell phones, and so they can provide some internet data if you need that. Many phones now, you have a hotspot option, and you can connect to your computer and use your data from your cell phone plan to do the little bit of work that you might need to do. You could also, if you're going to be extensively on the internet, you could get a prepaid hotspot for additional internet, and that works really well. We have one, and we used it quite a bit, and it seems to work very well for the times when you need internet. And then if you really need your television, you can get something like the Dish Network. They have a plan for RVers, and it's a monthly fee, so the months that you use it, you pay for it. And if you're not using it, you don't pay for it. So that's what we have. And then also many campgrounds have Wi-Fi, but it's not, typically it's not very good. It's very slow, and you can't do any data intensive stuff on it. And they also, some have cable. So if you want to go that route, and you're staying at a campground, you can look ahead on their website and see if they have cable and internet. Otherwise, you're going to need to budget for using some type of internet connectivity device while you're on the road. And then pets. Many people bring their pets with them when they're RVing, which is awesome. And at times, if they're going to be away from the RV for a day and their pet can't come with them, they get special gear for their RV, like a temperature sensor that will text their phone if the temperature in the RV gets hot, let's say the power goes out or something like that. So they know what the temperature is in their RV, and they're able to get back in time so the pets aren't in the sweltering heat or even freezing cold if maybe they ran out of propane or something while they were gone and their furnace isn't working any longer. And then other people may even choose to board their pets or take them to doggy daycare on the days when they're out. And this can get quite expensive depending on the area you're in. Like if you're down at Fort Wilderness, Disney, they have a doggy daycare there, but it is very expensive. So something you need to plan for and budget. If your furry friend can't go with you out for the day, you may want to invest in some options to make sure that they're safe.
And then there's entertainment. So think about where you're going and what you're going to spend on. So if you're like Sean just used the example of Disney, that's going to be an expensive entertainment budget because you're going to have to get the tickets. Also, when we go to new areas, I like to do like tours and go to museums, and all of these things have a fee associated with them. So just kind of think in advance what you're going to do. The great thing about RV travel, though, is sometimes where you're going is the entertainment as well. So if you're going to a national park or a state park and you're just enjoying that park and you're just hiking or biking or going to the lake and things like that, then there's not an extra fee, because also with an RV, you can bring your fun with you. You can bring your own bike so you don't have to rent them. You can bring your own kayak so you don't have to rent them. And don't forget to pack like games and puzzles and things like that for rainy days so that you don't have to go out somewhere for a little bit of entertainment. And the last thing is to remember to budget for savings. So we have a separate line item in our budget for savings. We call it the emergency fund. You can call it whatever you like, but things happen, accidents, mechanical breakdowns, even when you're on vacation, and you're going to need a little bit of extra money. Now, you might have insurance that's going to help pay for that, but it doesn't always necessarily come through right away, depending on your insurance company. So it's just good to have that little bit of padding. The gas might be a little more expensive. You might get a flat tire. I mean, there's just so many different things. So just have a little bit of extra padding, a little bit of savings, and then that way when something happens, it won't have to derail your vacation.
Yeah, and if you notice here in this slide, we actually have euro coins in there, because all of this not only applies to those of us in the US, but anywhere in the world where you're RVing, you're going to want to think about these same budget items. So that's why we have those euro coins thrown in there, because it applies to everybody, not just us in the US. And we use a few different budgeting tools to keep us on track, so we know when we want to go camping, we have some money in our camping line items, and we're able to take the RV out pretty much worry-free as far as the financial end goes. So we have free budgeting worksheets on our website, and we'll put a link to those in the description below, and you can click on those, and that shows you all the line items that we budget for as far as travel goes, and you can take that and modify it however you want to fit your particular needs. We also use the Every Dollar app, which is from the Ramsey Group, and that allows you to track your spending like by the minute. And every time you're in line to pay for something, you can open that app and make sure you have enough money for it and put whatever the cost is in there, and it'll automatically take it out of that line item. And it works really well for keeping track of your spending day to day. And then we also use You Need a Budget, also called YNAB, and that is a great tool for looking over long term and tracking all of your accounts over a time period, and it puts out great reports that we use like on a monthly or semi-annual basis to kind of track where we're at. So really, budgeting's the key to having a good time in whatever you're doing, whether it's RVing, taking long vacations somewhere, or just living day to day. Budgeting really is the key to keeping track of your spending and staying on top of your accounts.
And again, the most important reason why we shared this information about budgeting for RV travel is so that you can get the RV and then actually use the RV. I can't tell you how many times we've driven, past places where people can store their RVs at home, or even a campground that had an RV storage lot. And you could tell some of those RVs had not moved in a long time. And that is just so sad.
So we have a bunch of information. You can go to this link here, chickeriestravels.com/show, and that has all the stuff that we would normally be presenting at RV shows. But now we're doing it in this video series. And we also have a couple of books that you can see there. You can get those on Amazon. One is just on full-time RV finance. So everything you need to plan for money-wise, when you're full-time traveling, also some ways to make money as well when you're on the road. So check that out for sure. And until we see you on the road, safe travels.